He started Bits 360 as a side project out of his hostel room in Bits Goa, which became a phenomenal success. Then he started a couple of other ventures before founding Postman in 2014. Abhinav, welcome and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for the kind intro, Harish. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So, Abhinav, you can start off by telling us a bit about your backstory. You got involved in coding and freelancing from a very young age. So, can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so I've been fortunate in my life that my dad was very excited about computers. He got his first computer when he was at BHEL in Haridwar. So he bought a computer when I was in fifth grade, and I kind of got hooked onto it. I learned the basic stuff first, but kind of graduated to doing web programming like PHP and all the other CGI stuff that you would do back then to put up web servers. So that uh, led me to do like a lot of these side projects when I was in school. Kind of we actually started something to offer web design consultancy to clients around the world, that sort of thing. And I had this interest in computers that was kind of always intersected with studies. You had to do your physics, chemistry, maths, and I think I was a decent student. I was not like in the top percentile always. Like I was decent, so I would get by. So I spent a lot of time like doing all this stuff, but then it came to getting into college, which in India is extremely hard. And one of my friends knew about Bits. He knew about BitSat, which you had to take to kind of get in. And I the more I learned about Bits, I was like, that's where I actually want to be. Uh, I I think people had great things to say about Pilani, and Goa was just kind of coming back up. So I, like every other student, of course, I was also like do the IITs, AIEEE, BITS, and got lucky, I'd say, with my bit scores, and got in. And I still remember the day when I got into bits. I was like super excited. I didn't get computer science, which of course a lot of people wanted, but interestingly I actually chose because I messed up my choice form. So I didn't put the masters up front. I actually put B pharmacy. So my first uh, this thing was branch was assigned as B pharmacy, and I was like, oh my god, what's happening? I'm probably going to take like a lot of computer science electives uh, to continue my work on computers. But fortunately, I got bumped up. Ended up eventually at electronics and instrumentation, and yeah, joined the Goa campus in 2006. And we'll probably talk about more things there. But then I was just like very happy that okay, I was as close to computers as I could be, and I got a great college that I did want to study in.
Great, Abhinav. So, can you give us a glimpse of your 4 years at Bits? How did that look like? Were you part of any clubs?
Yeah, so actually, I the first year at Bits, I was like super excited. I was like, wherever websites need to be made, I would make those websites. So I think I worked with the what is that local? Uh, and I'm trying to remember the name. Waves, I think. The Waves website and the Quark website. I remember doing those, and I met my fellow friends, Abhimanyu, Vatsya, and a bunch of others, who like we kind of formed a group who were interested in like doing all this design work and development work. And of course, I wanted to deploy everything that I'd learned in school to make an impression on college seniors, and they noticed. So the result of that was I was given a lot of work to do. So we basically did the Waves website, we did the Quark website, we did this design for the Sizzling Sands magazine. We basically kind of redid the whole thing. We actually uh, all the way to typesetting the pages of the magazine. We kind of did that. we were never, I think I was formally probably part of like one group, but I kind of had my own thing going on. We started like this design consultancy called Grayscale while I was in college. And that is how we used to do like certain other projects. And then once in a while, some college senior would like rope us into doing something. And yeah, we were like a consultancy within the college. Uh, I'm trying to remember like which groups I was part of. And I think mostly anything to do with computers, I would be like part of that. Yeah, and then I wasn't formally involved with CL, but a close friend of mine was. So anything that they were doing, I was closely aware of, and of course, it led to a lot of other things eventually.
Great. Thanks, Abhinav. How was your PS1 and PS2 at BITS? I think it was there at your time, isn't it?
Yeah, so maybe I'll probably share like a bit of like the things I did during my college years, which led to I think actually me having like a great experience with both PS1 and PS2. So uh, before I actually entered BITS, there was this forum called I think actually we got rebranded eventually. There was a forum to help BITS aspirants kind of come in. And while I was, filling out my form, I found out like there were a lot of other seniors who were part of that forum, and they were helping out students who were either already there or were kind of getting in. So I actually really loved that forum, and I had actually experience with building out online bulletin boards before, prior to coming to BITS, because I was part of like a lot of these online communities where web design and other things would get discussed. So we actually took over that and kind of converted it to BITS 360. So in my first year in college, we actually launched this project. I'm not sure if anybody who's on the webinar has come across that, but uh, basically what happened was that when we came to Goa, we actually fell in love with like, oh my God, how beautiful the campus is. Like this is just like the perfect location, to have a college campus. And it's like beautiful, it's green, it's like, you kind of see all the water kind of behind the campus, and you were like, oh my God, I'm just going to go to a beach. So kind of like it was amazing to just be there. So we decided to build this virtual tour of the Goa campus. And the Goa campus virtual tour was launched, I think, on Independence Day, or like on a Republic Day or an Independence Day. I think my second semester in college, I think we launched it, and the launch was done through the Goa has a beautiful auditorium, so I was actually very scared of like going on stage and presenting it, but we did launch it, and it kind of just took off. So like basically. Any person who was online could now tour the Goa campus. We had like these waypoints that you could click and go in. And the idea was that anyone who's new to the campus would like visiting the campus virtually. And then we would have this community that people could come and ask questions in. So we kind of got all those pre-BITS 360 forum folks to kind of contribute there. And that led us to basically spending a lot of time in our first year just maintaining the forum and making sure we have engagement that kind of keeps going up. And I think at one point, essentially anybody who was writing Bitsat was coming into the forum. Like we did like a poll for the second batch, kind of my junior batch there, and basically we asked people like, hey, how many people have seen Bits 360? And everybody, basically had gone through that. So that was very exciting and kind of led us to having more belief and like doing these things uh, at at a larger scale. And as I mentioned before, we had also started this grayscale design consultancy on the side. So we used to take up these projects and initially started with like basic website stuff, and then it kind of graduated to uh, more involved websites. So I designed this website called letmeknow.in, which was I worked with now a close friend of mine, Nitin Rao, who was in an IT Surat Girl for that. So we kind of did these things on the side, and kind of what my inclination was that I basically just want to focus on this stuff that I'm kind of good at. Okay. Whenever I'm kind of choosing my career, like, whether it's PS1 or kind of PS2 or beyond. I mean, I didn't have very much of a long-term plan, but it was like, okay, if this is what I like doing, then that's what I would like to continue doing. The only problem was that because uh, computer based, web design and projects are also very close to gaming. So I got into gaming in a very big way. So I I had a gaming rig essentially built off my PC in my room, and I spent a lot of time doing that. And I also got into a Counter Strike clan, and so FIFA and Counter Strike and all these things were like these other like I kind of had this split personality. Like I was very productive doing all this work on the web development side, and then this other work which was not productive at all in a way, though you learn like collaboration and competitiveness with games. So so the end result of that was uh, like I wasn't always in the top percentile of people who would get to pick and choose their PS1 or PS2, and it was always like a, hit or a miss. So basically, my grades from so first semester, everybody who gets into college, right, studies like crazy, like we have to be there, like there's so many people, all top students from all over India, so we need to make things happen. And then like my CGPA was like some 8.9, and then after that I was like, yeah, I'm going to improve it later, maybe it's going to stay at like this level. But then it started steadily dropping. uh, so next semester was a little less, and this semester after that was a little less, and so the more I was involved in like these other things, the less my CGPA was. uh, so I mean, in general, I had a very fun experience in my first 2 years, but what it led to was kind of this uncertainty in what I would get as a practice school station. Luckily, I think one of my batchmates got Vikram Sarabhai Space Center opened up as a practice school station, and I filled it out. I thought, it would be cool to see how it happened, because it was a new PS station, not many people like knew about it. Like people would rather go for like the more established ones, or whatever the 9 or 10 pointers would typically choose. So with my branch being electronics and instrumentation, I think, I'm not sure whether there was a quota, or was it just a selection procedure. I got in there with like other folks, and this was in Trivandrum in Kerala, and I had a phenomenal time there. Um, the fellow students were like brilliant. My instructor, Amelin Prince at that time, was amazing. He was super supportive. He knew about Bits 360, so he wanted me to kind of do something at a similar level. And I mean, we did approach them for getting like satellite data to incorporate in the Bits 360 project. At that time, we were actually thinking about, hey, could this be a worldwide virtual tour? And they were like, yeah, no, I mean, this is interesting, and these are just like college kids asking for stuff. So it didn't go far, but I ended up, doing some things on one of their projects, just some testing stuff, and that was a fun project. Um, After that, when I came back, I became a little bit more concerned about my GPA, which had continued its downward trend. So I was like, okay, this is the third year in college. People are, and then suddenly, like from second year to third year, I saw this massive shift in people. They were like, oh my god, you guys were like gaming all the time, and now you are like studying, and everybody's ready for the MBA examinations, master's program. So I was like, I had no idea. So like the least I can do is I can get some good get at least better grades, and that's also the time when you get the uh, the courses that you have to study for your branch, right? So basically, I picked up a mix of uh, computer science courses, which I did want to study, along with the ones that I had to do, and I did decently well. I think I didn't do too badly, and that got me into Yahoo in Bangalore. So that was like, I think that leads into the Postman story as well, because I met Ankit, my co-founder and CTO there, um, and I basically ended up learning about APIs there at Yahoo, and I feel that is one of the best things about the PS program, that it actually places you in so many different areas which you would just not have any idea about. And I learned about I mean, Yahoo actually at that time was a big company, and it was a big user of PHP. So my skills were actually put to good use. I got into a good project there, and I pretty much worked as a full-time employee. Like, I mean, more than a full-time employee. I was actually working. I stayed there at Yahoo. I was like, doing getting all the free lunches, the free dinners, but I was also coding. And uh, I bonded with Ankit a lot there, who had just joined Yahoo, and we shipped a pretty major project for folks at Yahoo there. And I also took, continued working on other projects on the side as part of Grayscale. We also did, I think we also won like some third prize for a competition that Facebook had for a product that we had built called Exam Crunch, and that was fun. It didn't go too far, but we at least got some money out of there. So kind of what happened in PS2 was um, I was finally happy that despite my branch, I didn't want to solder things in life, and I was like, okay, I can work on code all the time, and Yahoo was the perfect place for that. uh, I, people were actually thinking about whether I'm going to, my mentors there were thinking about whether I'm going to go and ask for a job, because that's what everybody does at PS2. And I really wanted to work at Yahoo, but then I met my ex co-founder Vineet at that time, and that was the Exam Crunch project I had done with him. Um, I decided that no, actually, like I would actually not want to take up a job. I would want to start a company, and because PS2 for me was in my first part of the fourth year, so basically did that for 6 months and came back. And because I decided to start up, I was very actually happy that I didn't have to sit for placements anymore. So, so basically, I just came out of PS2, rejecting a job and deciding that I don't want to sit for placements. I don't want to do masters. I don't want to do MBA. I just want to build stuff. So that's how PS2 ended for me.
Whoa, that's quite an amazing journey during your college. And later on, like following up on Bits 360, later on you went ahead and started something called Teleport Me, which raised like $400,000 in its seed round. Could you tell us a bit about Teleport Me?
Yeah. So Vineet and I actually had connected through the work that I was doing with Grayscale, and initially we had a bunch of ideas about what we would like to do. Vineet had a bunch of ideas, and I was the CTO of the company, so I was tasked with implementing those ideas. And what we realized was um, that Bits 360 as an idea could actually be uh, ported as a product for the worldwide community. And at that time, smartphones were just becoming very popular. People were very excited about owning one. I had gotten an iPhone, and we were like, this is where the next generation of apps are going to be. So, so initially, we actually started with just thinking about that as a business idea. Like, can we go to real estate uh, agents and say that, hey, you are selling all these properties, and you would want to make a good impression. So why don't we actually help you sell them better, right? So that was the pitch for the virtual tour thing. Interestingly, we had actually also gone to the Goa government when I was in college, and some of the college seniors had helped us out there. Because Bits 360 was a project that I think everybody would quote that uh, this is something that our students had done, and we were always trying to find like this business applicability for that thing, right? So I mean, while I was in college, the Bits 360 thing extended to Pilani and then Dubai, and then eventually we had all the 4 campuses. But we were also trying to kind of monetize the idea. So we had gone to the Goa government and said that, hey, we can help you, do this better, and we'll help you make like CDs and whatnot. So that idea didn't sell very much. But when smartphones came along, it became very interesting to think about that. Okay, why wouldn't we let people create these virtual tours themselves and share it online? So we basically did things on 2 tracks. One was building the smartphone app, and the second thing was a business-focused offering. And interestingly, we actually built a virtual tour for the NUS Singapore Institute. So we got a contract with them. So that helped us bootstrap. And then when we built the 360 app, so we kind of took out the we took out the bits part from them from the product and just call it 360. And we launched it on the Android Play Store. The product did decently well. I think on its lifetime, it also had like about 7-8 million downloads. It got featured on the Play Store. It allowed people to take panoramas and share them with a virtual community online. And my co-founder was in the US, and we raised to seed money, about roughly like uh, 500,000, I think closer to 400,000. I don't remember the exact details now. And uh, that was the idea, like become a hub for travelers who are going around the world and taking photos and taking panoramas and share it with other travelers. Um, we started working out of my Noida. My dad had an apartment in Noida, so we moved there out of our house. We moved there and worked out of that house there. We were like 3 people, and we actually opened our PS1 station. So we opened a PS1 station. We had 10 people there who actually had no desks for a while. I think they didn't have desks for a very long time because we were like this bootstrap startup. The interesting thing was I met my third co-founder Abhijit there, who was like kind of like the star of that batch, and he would like just get stuff done very very quickly. So yeah, so for 2 months, we were like 3 people, 10 interns. Initially, it was funded by kind of like the bootstrapping work that we had done, and then after we raised that round, we had a proper office, and I worked on that for a bit. Uh, and eventually, I decided that I'd worked on that idea for a very very long time, and I wanted to do something different. So the company having raised its round, and it basically having a stable footing, I decided to look at other things, and I think in the last half of it, I basically was building Postman for myself, which is what I did eventually in that year. So yeah, we went to seed as a stage, and after I sensed that I need to do something different, I moved on and essentially became a freelancer, for 1.5 years.
That's amazing. Just for the record, Teleport Me was India's first app to be published on the global Google Play Store. Um, Now, like, let's get to the meat of the webinar. What was the reason behind you building Postman, and how did the initial days of Postman look like?
So actually, when I was at Yahoo, I realized that we were working a lot on APIs. Like our primary job as developers at Yahoo was ingesting these APIs and kind of converting them into a dashboard that other people could use. And there were a whole lot of other things that the API let people do, and we had to convert it into a proper project. So uh, what we realized was like Ankit and I would often have issues with the API, in the sense that if there would be a new version of the API, or how is the API supposed to work. Uh, all of these issues kind of came up over and over again. And at that time, our mentor there, who was amazing, and I'm still in touch with him. He taught us about the principles of REST and how it works. But the tooling for all of us put together was really something that we didn't enjoy working with, or was not optimized for our workflow. So what we did was, we'd write some code and things would go to production, some things would break, and that cycle would repeat over a while. Then when I was at Teleport Me, I saw that there was a similar pattern. Basically, we were building three simultaneous apps, iPhone, Android, and on the web. And while we were a smaller team, about 4 or 5 people, we had the same issues. You had to build an API. The API had to be integrated with all these services, all these clients, and we had to share documentation, we had to share tests, we had to share other things. And uh, I saw that the tooling again was kind of far behind, so I decided to build something for myself. And it started as a very basic HTTP client, and I saw that Chrome was a pretty good platform for this to be developed upon. So I built it and put it up on the web store, and it just kind of took off from there. Basically, people started using it, they started recommending it. They really liked the experience of using Postman, and it was a fun side project for me. And when I quit Teleport Me, I basically saw that there was so much traction on this that I had no idea about, and people are writing in like every week that, okay, this is something that could be done, that is something could be done, have you thought about this? And some of those folks actually work with me full time now, like they're engineers at Postman. So was like that's where you kind of start realizing that there is something like a product market fit here. And I started becoming very curious about what's going on, and I of course knew the problem pretty well, having experienced it myself. So I connected with Ankit and asked him that, hey, this thing is kicking off, and we should do something about it. And Ankit got involved, and we started churning out features and started listening to developers more closely. And along the way, we actually got a call from Google, and at that time I was in Bangalore. So Google reached out and they said that, hey, we love Postman, we want to feature you guys in the Chrome Web Store, which a new version of that was launching. So I was like, that's even more amazing. So we did a new version of the Chrome of the Postman app, and we put it up on the Chrome Web Store, and that got us like really on the front page of like Chrome, which was also exploding back then. So uh, yeah, and we just were Ankit, Abhijit, and I, and so I connected with Abhijit after more and more work started coming our way, and we are like, hey, who do we go to, to help us out with this? So Ankit was, I remember this well. Ankit was in Bangalore once, and we were talking to another one of the PS1 folks who were there in Teleport Me. So, by the way, like if this would sound like an endorsement of the PS1 program. Like all the connections I made were at like PS1, PS2, and I effectively did two PS1s and one PS2. So one of the students who were there in PS1 knew that Abhijit was in Bangalore, and he connected us, and we asked Abhijit that, hey, do you want to work on this? And we started working together, and the project became so popular that I think everybody started noticing, and we started getting inbound calls from like VCs, including Nexus, and they were like, "Hey, we just want you to work on this." And I mean, we had decided to start a company at some point, but that just accelerated everything. So we basically took a $1 million like seed round, which eventually got rolled into a total of 7 million in Series A to start the company.
Wow, that great beginnings, Abhinav. So, there are a lot of products today which face issues in acquiring users. Postman scaled from 0 to 10 million users. What do you think, is the major issues with most products out there today? What are they missing out on? Why aren't they able to acquire users?
Uh, it's that 0 to 1 problem, or 0 to 10,000, whatever you might call it, right, is extremely challenging. And I think I'm probably not an expert in how to solve for that, like, because I mean, Bits 360, 360, and Postman, like, I think the common pattern there, which at least I saw, was that fundamentally they were like useful things, and that's just like one of the challenges that people face is, right, like they start building too much, very early on, and what happens is that you're not solving for like that one problem, and because you have like you have to create a business plan, right? So when you have to create a business plan, you start thinking about like 5 different things in a business plan. So for any of these things, we never had a business plan. We were only focused on solving for like 1 or 2 problems that an end user might have. So that was the kernel of like everything. I think the second thing is that the early founders have to be very vocal about championing the usefulness of the product, and they have to find the right channels in which these users might lie. So for Bits 360 as a product, we had a forum which got people in, and fortunately Bitsat was a pressing concern for people so to want to search for Bits 360. Similarly, for the 360 app, we got featured on the Android Play Store. So the quality of the product was high. That's how we got featured, and there was value inside the product, which is why people continued using it. But the channel that was there on the Android Play Store was very useful to help us get that first set of users. And with Postman, we were on the Chrome Web Store. So I think finding the right distribution channel, the right value proposition, and talking to these communities over and over again helps you get that first set of early evangelists, which are very, very powerful in guiding the vision of the product. And we have had failures as well. Like when I was starting Postman, when I was thinking about starting Postman as a company, I went to people around me and they were like, "Hey, I don't want to uh, ever pay money for something like Postman because I'll build it in a day." And you kind of hear that feedback, and you're like, "Okay, if you have built it in a day, why haven't you built it yet?" You know, and then you get this feedback from your early evangelists who like, "Oh, this is adding value to my product. This product is adding value to my day-to-day life. So, can you make this better for me rather than I'm going to make this better for you?" So those kind of conversations people don't have in the early days of the product, and they get too sidetracked with the mechanics of building a company and mechanics of building a business plan. And I feel that can shorten your focus. uh, uh, I mean that just shortens your lifespan as a company. uh, and I mean, now there are so many distribution channels available to people through like very cheap costs, that people should explore. That's been my observation. Like half the time you go to people and say that, "Hey, would you want to try this product?" The product is just not useful.
Thanks, Abhinav. Customer-centric approach always works. So you've run both bootstrap and venture-backed startups. When do you think it's the right time to bootstrap, and when do you think you should go for funding?
So I think in the initial days, I would always bootstrap as much as you can, um, because the way one should see venture funding is that it's an accelerant to ideas that you have. So uh, if you are thinking about, uh, I mean, either you identify a market need early enough and you want to go for like a seed round of investment to help you um, get the first few engineers. In some cases, it can be hard to just bootstrap and build the first few prototypes of the product. So in that case, I feel seed money, especially with the accelerators that are available here, are a great idea. But really thinking about venture funding uh, should in my opinion, happen when you have identified your product, you have identified your market, you know how to crack it, because you're putting that, you need to put that capital to good use, if you want to put it that way, right? So if you're just raising capital to survive, it typically has like this downward spiral, but you want to be able to tell that I'm going to put this capital to good use. Like in our case, our vision for the seed round was very clear, that you want to get to this next stage of a product market fit where we have proved the collaborative capabilities of the product, right? And Series A was actually building towards more of the API lifecycle, and then building a monetization engine complementing that. And beyond that, of course, we're scaling up within the enterprise and things like that. So those are like specific milestones that I think one should look at. Large amounts of money in the very early days can also dilute the focus of the company, and you might end up chasing too many things. So in that sense, bootstrapping sometimes helps as a very strong constraint to like you can't do anything else, right? Like, I mean, I was coding, Abhijit was coding, Ankit was coding, like for the first 8 months, because there was nobody else, right? And because there's nobody else, we just focused on the topmost important problem for our customers and users to solve. So sometimes you can enforce that constraint on yourself. Sometimes you can unblock that constraint if you need more people to help you build out things. And then from that point beyond, I would focus on like product market fit alignment, along with the venture funds alignment with your business model and your thinking. And that's when you should, when you have the right fit. Like in most cases, when it doesn't work, is that these two things are at odds with each other.
Great, great. So we have a lot of young entrepreneurs on the call today. Few of them run college startups. So since you have started multiple ventures, what would be your advice to these guys?
So it's I think uh, okay. So I mean, we covered like focus on your customer. That is like the highest item that is there. I think there should be like at least one designated person whose job is just to champion the rights of the end user. We talk about that often. You miss that, and sometimes that job in kind of falls over to the CTO of the company, and sometimes it falls over to the CEO of the company. So I think that is just a given that I feel every startup should have. Like we often go to uh, whenever we have these events and we talk to people, they're like, okay, who's the one responsible for this? And typically you find out like either it's everybody or it's nobody, and both of those are not good answers. I think the second thing I would probably give, which is probably something that comes in at a later stage in every startup, is having that muscle of building like data driven decisions very, very early on, because that I felt is extremely hard. Like, as entrepreneurs, we are tuned to validate I have hypothesis, and it's very hard to say that, hey, I've invested so much of my life into this, I've so much of my energy into this, and you don't want to think about the failure scenario at all, right? So because that's how we are kind of hardwired, we don't tend to look at data when it is out of sync with our beliefs, right? So we of course want we want our companies to succeed, so we look for data that proves that. Everybody looks for that data, right? So if you're giving a presentation about your startup, you will quote a number that makes you look good, right? Like, oh, we had like these many registrations and we had these many things and that many uh, whatever your core metric is. But what ends up happening is that when you're not measuring across the entire set of things that you should be tracking, I mean, you don't have to be too rigid about it, but like just basic things. What are your unit economics? Are people churning out of your product? Who are these people who are churning out, right? Who are these people who had a bad experience with the product? So like honing into that quantitative as well as qualitative uh, data helps a lot, whether you are an early stage startup, pre-product market fit, or a late stage startup. Like, I just have seen so many people who just don't look at the data as deeply as they should be. And sometimes, people even like, torture data into revealing truths that they think are there. uh, and that is something my biggest advice would be for people. Like, invest actually in those systems early on, invest in people who think that way, and it'll help you, take the right decisions at the right times. If things are working, great. You can actually use that to figure out what your next step is going to be. But if things are not working well, you can make sure that you are calibrating, with who you're hiring, how much you're raising at the right stage, and you actually stay very much on course with your startup. So if the data is not telling you, that, hey, I should actually work on my product right now, I mean, you should focus on that problem, right, rather than thinking about like how I'm going to monetize that product. Those are very common problems that I think are very easily fixable. And people typically start with using like Google Analytics and things like that, and that's good. But we actually invested in our own infrastructure to help us understand that, and that's been just phenomenal, for our growth.
Great, Abhinav. So this was super insightful. I'm done with my questions. Audience, we are opening it up for the audience Q&A. You can comment out your questions, and Abhinav, you can pick and choose the questions and answer them through the
Sure.
comment box. Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to answer the first question around scalability of the product. So, uh, so scalability is something that if you're having in the early stages of your product, then in some ways it can be a good thing because your product is getting used. I think I would look at like absolute numbers with respect to uh, where exactly your issues are. In most cases, what we have found is that typically some things are like just poorly engineered, and because when you're starting out, you really don't have a sense of scale of like how actually you can manage like large infrastructures. Uh, so you end up uh, getting a false sense of scale. Generally, what we have learned is just keeping your architecture very simple. And we have a rule at Postman that we should only implement things that we understand well. So when I was building Postman, I didn't choose like fancy frameworks or fancy things, like just the bare minimum tech that we knew we could completely understand and it worked. That's what we implemented, and you can actually go very, very far with that. Typically, early stage problems of scale happen when you adopt a technology uh, that is not something that you fully understand yet. And what you're doing is fixing these symptoms uh, of the technology issue, and you can really then bring your product mindset to it and say that, okay, this is the experience that we want people to have, and if the experience is suffering, then let's kind of fix for that problem. uh, and on the other side, if let's say you do have a ton of users who are coming in and using your platform or your services, um, then it's time to invest in a really great technology stack and a team that can manage that stack. So for us, we were running off Linode servers for a while, and then once we started scaling, we decided to move to AWS completely, and we have a great team that helps us manage that. But we did it at a time when we knew that we had the resources to understand AWS well, and we could make the transition easily. And essentially, software products are like never done. Like if your product is scaling, then you will always need to keep investing in the quality of the product, the security of the product. Availability is another issue. And what we have done is we have created separate teams at Postman whose mandate is these key attributes, along with product teams whose mandate is to deliver things to our users at scale. Uh, and we have a ton of instrumentation in our services, in our platform, to make sure that things are always up. All right, so quite a few questions here. Let me see which one I can pick up. Uh, do you still get time to code, or is it all management now? I only code in Postman now, so not too much of regular programming anymore. It's been probably I think my last project was actually doing our website, and the Postman app is something that I handed off to our engineers a while ago. Okay, let me see if. All right, so a lot of good questions here, so I'm going to try to answer as many as I can best. Um, Let me, I think, kind of go in order because these all look like pretty good questions, though I'll probably be more succinct. So, what should be the strategy for B2B startups when bootstrapping? It's I don't think there is so much of a strategy as figuring out like which product area that you are in. I think having domain experts who have prior experience in that line of business can help accelerate your bootstrapping a lot, because a lot of the early work is actually figuring out the pain points of users and customers. And if you have a domain expert working with you, let's say if you are designing software for the healthcare industry, so having somebody in your team who thinks about that domain or has thought about that domain for a long time can help a lot. Um, I think accelerators can help there as well in getting like that seed money done. I think my preference is that the core team of founders should be very good generalists. They should be able to code, they should be able to design, and if you couple them well with a domain expert who understands the space very well, you can actually go pretty far. Um, I'm going to see. Yeah, a related question is, how do we build the right team around a product? So, uh, one thing about great products is that you should think about having really good sense of other products in the category. And for Postman, it was very important for us to think about great design very early on, for example. So, we of course, wanted great engineering and great engineers who knew APIs well. And that was what the founding team brought to the table. But we also coupled it with great designers who could really refine the UI of the product and really make it stand out among the crowd. Uh, and once we kind of got through that cycle, we had to bring on uh, infrastructure engineers and front end engineers to help us scale the cloud side of the platform that we are building. So as you go through like each of these stages, typically there will be 100 problems at a time that you would have to solve. And my typical model is to pick like the top 3 or 5 problems and figure out, is that something that we could have within? Do we have that within the team, or somebody can kind of take it up, or do we want to bring somebody else? In the initial phases, I would still prefer people who have a more general disposition to things, being experts at one thing, and that model kind of worked very well for us. Later in your trajectory, you would need very specialized people, like who are excellent in their fields, respectively, and a combination of that is something that is a system that we have built, and typically teams end up building. I'm going to take up this question of managing your studies while you're thinking about all of this. If you have a project idea in mind, I think I would never kind of compromise, studies at the expense of some of these things. Uh, I don't think, I mean, as I mentioned, the practice school program for me was very, very useful in honing into, what both of my startup ideas became. And what I found out that picking the right selection of electives, talking to the right professors, helped me understand some of these things more deeply than earlier. So I think you can make it complementary. And I think it does become hard, to if you're if you're very much into an idea. I think time boxing certain things can help a lot. And see, if you do get a killer idea and you have like product market fit, then at that time you might want to like take a call saying that, hey, this is what I want to do. For me, in the fourth year in college, like placements became like less important, and I actually enjoyed academics more because there was no pressure to like get great grades, and that helped me a lot. So it's a very much your personal preference, and yeah, I would not just put too much time into gaming, which is what I did. So I'm going to pick up this question of what are the main soft skills to consider as a leader to keep technical teams motivated. I think this is actually a pretty big problem for most leaders, especially when you don't have prior experience in leading technical teams. Now, uh, I think one of the best ways to do that is actually communicating the goalposts to your technical team really well in advance. So being able to communicate your vision of what you want to build and how the team can get there is something that you learn as an art. You have to listen to your engineers. You have to listen to them. What are the technical challenges that they are facing? What typically a lot of leaders do is they kind of throw things over the wall for people to build. And while in the initial phases, people can be motivated, they just don't know where the goalposts are. And they might end up over engineering the product or under engineering the product. Over engineering actually is a bigger risk because people want to succeed as engineers. And what they try to guess is, hey, this is what you might be trying to get them to do, and they try to design their systems for that. So the ways in which we do this at Postman is we have a very clear set of like top level vision statements for each squad or each team at Postman, which lines up to the top level company vision. And we have clear OKRs for them to hit. And we have objective metrics in through which we can tell them that, hey, this is this is what you're doing well, this is what you're not doing well, and that helps them a lot. Like people who are not performing well, want to perform better when they have these benchmarks in front of them. And we try to keep like compensation and some of these things very, very separate from these kind of discussions. So really having that knack to be able to listen and then be able to communicate well helps a lot. Uh, and yeah, as a leader, I think 80% of your time is just listening to what's going on, and just that alone actually helps people stay motivated because they know like their thoughts and their asks are getting factored in your decision making as a leader. Uh, so Nipun asks, what's your take on conducting workshops and short series to train college peeps about Postman? We actually do have a college program that we are building up. So feel free to write to us you can email me at abhinav@postman.com and we can get this set up. We are doing this in several colleges in the US, and they have been pretty popular. So we would love to do that. Okay, lots of good questions. I think I'm going to pick up like a bunch of questions which are around early stages of an idea. Uh, so, how do you find the right customer base to get the right feedback? I think the way I have seen it work is that uh, first is the core identification of the problem and who resonates. Uh, to whom does that problem resonate the most? So uh, I actually tapped communities and people like me who would be interested in APIs for Postman. When we were building virtual tours, we gave it to friends and families to see, are they excited about it? Um, and I think you just have to get, a lot of like brutal feedback in the very beginning. What people try to find is like positive, affirmative feedback. And what you need to see is, are people, falling in the positive bit or the negative bit or the neutral bit? And positive and negative are both good. Neutral is what actually kills products, because people are like, yeah, it's good, and they make you feel happy uh, about it, and you actually think it's good, right? Because you are tuned to you want to get like decent feedback. So uh, I think in today's world, there is Reddit, there is Hacker News, there is Facebook. uh, I think I would just try to pick people who are 1 degree removed from my immediate circles and ask them for feedback, and then kind of take it from there. So I think a bunch of that this should answer hopefully a bunch of questions. Um, I think so for people who are not studying in college and trying to find like-minded people is it's definitely a hard problem. I think one way in which I've seen successful founders do is they actually build prototypes and they try to mingle in communities that might be supportive of startups early on. And what you find out is that once you have a prototype and you have something real working, people actually want to work with you. Uh, and People really, in the initial days should get excited about the vision and the mission you have. And if you kind of sense that, I would actually try to, work with them for a bit and figure out if that's a right fit for them. In my case, I worked with Vineet in this whole consulting phase for a while, and we found out that, hey, we can actually work together for a while. So that worked out for me pretty well. So I think I'm probably be able to take two more questions. Uh, so what if a product is built as a solution on top of another product's problem? I think this is a very challenging issue, and I would actually want to avoid it as much as you can, because you kind of run the risk of uh, basically trying to solve for problems that are on somebody else's roadmap. Uh, it also is a long-term risk for your product, because you're probably not talking to the users directly of that other product so well anyway. Like the people who are building that particular product just have too much information about what the real issues are with that specific product. So things like browser extensions, for example, can become redundant for that reason. And I had to pick Postman, which solved an adjacent problem in the API space, very differently from just building another extension to support whatever Chrome did on the browser. So it's a big risk. It's also a distribution risk that you would probably want to avoid. Uh, One way to solve for this is actually picking up things on platforms like Salesforce or Atlassian, where they have defined ways in which you can add to their platform pretty well. And if you pick up an orthogonal area for your product to solve, then I think it's a pretty good approach rather than just building or trying to fill a gap on somebody else's roadmap. Which factors do you consider before deciding to outsource service or build an in-house solution? This is something that comes in very early on when you're building teams. In my opinion, all the core parts of the product design phase, the product engineering phase, and anything that results in you adding value to your product should all be in-house. Things that are outside your immediate startup would be things like legal, accounting, and other services which are just other people are domain experts in, and that's what you typically outsource. So we kind of look at that mix over and over again. But let's say if you are getting your core product idea designed by some other person, you will just not be able to iterate upon it, and it will eventually become a blocker in your ability to iterate. And I think okay, let me see if I can answer one more. Which all aspects do you consider while analyzing sustainability of the product? Uh, so, so if you're not charging for the product, the first indicator is how many users are coming in and how many users are staying. That's so there are engagement metrics and there are frameworks around it. So you kind of look at, okay, how am I acquiring a user and how am I retaining a user? And actually, people tend to focus more on acquisition, but retention is much more important. If you have like 10 deeply engaged users on the platform rather than 1,000 that you're getting every day and losing, you know, 90% of them. But if you're getting like just 20 people and 10 people stay, you have a very high retention metric. I think those are two things that are critical to all stages of a product, and I would encourage everybody to think through that. I think about five independent customers saying that I like this product, people who we have not influenced as a benchmark. Once you actually get to five people, or you can stretch it to 10 people, you actually know that the problem that you are solving is actually a really relevant problem for them. And the only rule is that they should not be friends and family. Friends and family really bias your data. So those are the first signs of sustainability. After that, you can go into metrics around active users, and if you have customers, then how many people are paying you, etc. Okay, Karthik asked this question twice, so I'm going to just take this up. What are the early stage parts of startup? Like how much money where one should put, and how to pitch your idea to investors? Um, the first 2 years of a startup is just building the product, and basically you are investing in design, engineering. If you're building a software startup, you might be doing some operational works if you are in operations to do those things. I'd say what investors are looking for is the first sign of a product market fit, that you have been able to go to prospective customers or users with a finished product, and the product is showing those early signs of engagement that we talked about. And that's what you're pitching to investors. What you're saying is, uh, and this is how a typical pitch goes, this is what's happening in the world. That is why the world is not in the right state. These are the things that you need to fix in the world to get the product to its to get the world to a better state. Your product is a fix for those issues. These are the early people who have identified that your product is a fix for those issues, and hence somebody should invest. That's pretty much the nature of like all pitches. That's what early stage investors are looking for. Sometimes there is a problem with people not believing in the what is wrong with the world thing. If you, for example, in today's world, say that, yeah, people actually have a lot of problems going to a theater. People would be like, yeah, right now we don't want to get people into theaters anymore. uh, but a bigger problem might be how do people stay engaged and happy when they are socially isolated. So those are things that investors are looking for. Like, what is fundamentally that is wrong in the world, and then there's those early stages of your product metrics are enough to convince them. A final bit is also team. Like, who is the team that is working on the product? Do they have domain experts? Are they going to just raise money and then hire like 10 people to help them build the product? Like, that can also make a difference, because investors like a core team that is super engaged, super solid, and knows and is passionate about the problem really well. So, Harish, I mean, I'm not sure how much time we
Yeah,
have.
I guess
I
that was the
guess,
last
Yeah,
yeah,
question.
yeah. I
yeah.
think,
So
Thanks a lot, Abhinav. Yash, you can give the thank you note.
yeah, so hello everyone. Yes, this side. I hope everyone enjoyed the session and got a clear view of Postman's journey. Would like to thank Abhinav sir personally for accepting my invitation and taking out his valuable time from his busy schedule straight from Valley. We have been planning a session with him for a long time, and finally we got the opportunity for a great webinar. Thank you everyone for attending the session, and we'll be back with yet another bits to start a webinar series soon. Stay tuned till then, stay safe, and yes, good night.